having those conversations with people who are seeking. And I think that's the thing. People are seeking. And it feels like they are seeking anything other than what is true.
Hello and welcome back to the Anything But Quiet Time podcast. We are Rachelle and Carder. We don't do this often, I think, because we don't want it to be like a shameless plug, but I think we do really want to encourage people to subscribe for the sake of, if you enjoy this podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll see it in your feed and in your notifications every week.
And it'll pop up, and generally there's something really tantalizing in the summary that will make people go, ooh.
Usually it's like this, the summary. Today, Rachelle talks about God.
Yeah. And love.
Whoa.
And Jesus.
Crazy.
What?
Oh my goodness.
So actually what I would like to start off with is that at the time that we are recording this particular podcast, we have just gone through it's the aftermath of Beryl.
Mm-hmm. Hurricane Beryl, yeah.
Which was a Category 1. And if you're listening or watching in a different part of the nation, you're like, it's a Cat 1. What's the big deal? But Harvey was like as bad as it gets. And you and I both experienced both of these hurricanes. The weird thing about this particular hurricane was obviously the winds, I think, were something we didn't anticipate. And the damage from that with the outages and everything, it's been real. I think hopeless is a good word for it.
Yeah, I mean, every storm is different because we experienced the rain with Harvey. It was a tropical storm when it got to us. Yeah. And with Beryl, if it had gone more east, a lot of just the countryside would have experienced, because the east side of the hurricane eye is the harshest wind.
Yeah.
And it happened to go on the west side of Houston, leaving most of the damaging winds to affect a very populated area.
Very much a cityfied place. A lot of people.
Every storm's different.
And we're all going to be dealing with it for a while because there's damages to homes and things like that, as well as, there are families that have been hugely impacted. Some of them lost loved ones. And there was something that a friend of yours who he's a licensed counselor, right?
Yeah, licensed therapist. His name's Derek. And really, if you live outside of the Southeast Texas area and you just a part of our podcast, first of all, thank you. But you may not have hurricanes on the mind, but this is really good for any personal storm of how are we going to be mentally and emotionally okay after a storm. And one thing we didn't get to on our radio show, I said, what about if you feel like it should be okay? Your power came on within 24, 48 hours. You didn't have any damage, but you just have this, you just can't get past it for some reason. And he goes, keep in mind, it's usually the thing that usually takes you over the edge. It's not usually that in of itself. It's the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah,
keep in mind all of the things that you've gone through. We've all gone through with COVID, with unrest, you name it. Of whether it's politically and nationally, or whether it's just your personal storms. And so he has kind of 4 steps that he takes to make sure that we are mentally and emotionally well after something like this.
And I think it's worth sharing this information. If you text the word health to the number 893-893, that conversation that you had with him yesterday is available, and he gave some great tips. And one of them, he said, it's like you're cheating because it's so easy. Breathe. Just deep breathing.
Yeah.
That hopeless feeling that we talk about, the place where you should not stay. I also want to be careful because when you're experiencing something like a trauma, you also want to give yourself permission to grieve.
Oh, yeah.
And in that, it may feel a little hopeless. And I definitely don't want to stay in that position.
Sure.
But it got me thinking. In fact, I was just talking to somebody in the hallway. I said, how did you do? And she said, well, our electricity came on a few days afterwards. So we were up and running on Wednesday. And she said, unfortunately, I had 7 people in my home, and she said one of our tables got shattered, and it was glass, and we didn't realize that it had shattered, and we let the dog out.
Oh, no.
And she and her son were walking on this glass, and they had shards in their feet.
Oh.
So they're carrying her son, who apparently got the brunt of it, into the bathtub area and taking a flashlight to try to tweezer out these shards.
Yeah.
And she says the words, if that's the worst that can happen, then we did okay. And she said it more than once. And I thought, have you allowed yourself to go ahead and go, this still stinks?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are people who, as I shared before, people died.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, I mean, pain is pain.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people struggled through that. And I was definitely one of them. We didn't have power for quite a long time. It felt like forever, right? And I was watching a documentary yesterday, and it was about some of the people who have experienced the residual effects of the atom bombs being, they were testing the site. They weren't testing a site. They were at a site and they were testing the bombs. And some of the people that have experienced the aftermath of that, the cancers that have come through, there was this fighter of a woman who would take these things to Congress and like be fighting on behalf of the people and saying, you know, these folks were never warned and ... It's not a pretty part of our history. But I heard in her voice at one point, it felt like it almost broke as she was talking. I don't want to be alone in fighting this fight. And I think sometimes when we are in the middle of something, that is the lie of the enemy that constantly comes back. I'm alone. I'm alone.
Yeah.
And I have to do it by myself. Or if I'm in that position of power as a parent, people look up to me, right? Or as a leader at work, I'm a manager, or whatever it is. We all have a position of authority in some way. I have to maintain strength here so that, you know, everybody else can lean on me. But we also, the opposite of that has to be true too. There has to be an opportunity sometime down the road where we are even allowed to lean on the people who are under us in that pecking order.
Sure. Yeah.
And honestly, I think when you allow yourself, and we've talked about this before, when your dad apologized to you, that makes us go, okay, so I'm not the only one who's feeling this. That person's so strong. Look, nothing ever bothers them. Well, that's a lie. Because somebody's got a breaking point, right? And I think it's okay not to run around like, you know, a person who's lost their mind and screaming and...
Well, I panicked. You were hanging from the chandelier. Well,
just,
I panicked.
you know, and I did it 3 days in a row. Is that a problem? But to be able to say, I feel like I'm drowning here. Can you pray for me?
Yeah.
You're not alone. And certainly there's a prayer wall at ksbj.org that you can post a prayer. You don't even have to say who you are. Sometimes it's better when a complete stranger prays for you, because then you don't, at least in the moment, feel, which sometimes can be an illusion. You think that you have this semblance of control in front of people. They think that you're this person in control. I think people can see through things too. But if it helps to have a stranger pray for you, so as not to upset the apple cart with other people in your life who are looking to you to be the strong person. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I think when you talk about pain being relative, it's so true, because it's not a reality show, you know?
Yeah.
We're not looking for the world's worst situation. Like who is it? Like, we're not trying to go there, because somebody, I guess, eventually would win, unfortunately. Somebody always has it worse than us. And while we don't want to, of course, go, woe is me, my situation's so terrible, because then, you know, a lot of people would go, how dare you? I go through this. I get it. We don't want to be in that situation. But it shouldn't stop me from receiving proper mental and emotional care, from grieving, from praying, from crying, just because even somebody I know might have it worse.
Yeah.
If it's pain, if it's struggle for me, I have to go about that in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And
That's really
I don't know, we just have that
important
comparison, like it's going to be a new CBS show this fall.
I think sometimes points of comparison can be helpful at times. A friend of ours, you know, was sharing, I thought about visiting Kenya, and there was no air-conditioned circumstances there, and they live in impoverished ways. And I thought, that's a point of comparison that I think at times would be healthy. In that moment, though, it struck me, we get acclimated to our environment no matter what the environment is. So if I am used to living a certain way, one man's riches is another man's poverty, is what I'm trying to say. I lived in a way that perhaps some people who had it better than me would look on and go, how did you do that? That's all I knew, you know? So if I've acclimated to a certain condition and a schedule, and electricity is available because of the schedule, and I have a job that I can go to, and now all of that is stripped away, that's a trauma. Regardless of whether you live in an impoverished nation, you've experienced a trauma in our very rich nation. And I need to give it a beat. I need to breathe in and breathe out.
And that's one of his recommendations.
Yeah.
And I love he's a Christian counselor. And so if you want to hear that whole, it's like 6 minutes. It's a great stuff that he had to share. Text health to the number 893-893.
There was one other thing I'd like to bring up that has nothing to do with a hurricane. It's where I've been reading, and I've read through this passage before, and sometimes you land on these places and you're like, what is that? What did I just read? And it was about a couple of prophets. There's this guy, first of all, when Israel is separated from Judah in the nation that was at one time all of Israel, right? It does happen kind of during Solomon's watch, because Solomon, he just messes up royally. No pun intended.
He's a king.
See, he's a king and he's royal.
We get it.
It's very sad. I don't know how many times. If you want to know the saddest character in the Bible, maybe some would say Judas. Part of me wants to go with Solomon, because if you're just that wise and yet that lost, wow. Anyway, he lets things get out of hand on his watch, and it's almost like it's almost like the advice of the therapist who says it's so easy, just breathe. But yet it's the last thing that sometimes in crisis mode I think of.
Sure.
He had so many, just really, it's in black and white. Don't marry people from other lands because you may be tempted to follow their religious cultures. Mm-hmm. It's not like a huge, like, oh, this just in. Blinking news headline. He married like up to 1,000 people. And some of those, when we say married, there wasn't necessarily, he went through that many ceremonies, because I cannot imagine.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of hors d'oeuvres. That's a lot of chocolate fountains.
That's a lot of somebody's random aunt telling you what to do and you've never met her. Hey, y'all, grab the chairs. Come here.
Fixing your tie.
Yeah. Who is this woman? And then the groom goes, I don't even know her.
I don't know.
know.
She's not my aunt. She came in just with the people.
There's some authoritative woman always.
Yeah, she heard there was a chocolate fountain. But he let the nation get away from him. And there's this guy that God says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give 10 of the tribes actually to this dude over here. We're going to call it Israel, and Solomon's only going to be in charge. Solomon's son, the inheritance there is only going to be in charge of Judah. And it's just this sad thing. The kid gets some bad advice. Solomon's son, they have lived now in this entitled place. I mean, if you read a little bit about the riches of Solomon, he had a lot of money. He had more than he knew what to do with. He's like, we have more gold? Well, let's make shields. Shields that are useless. Because gold is bendable. Let's just make a lot of shields of gold. I don't know. It struck me. I'm like, that's what you're going to make? Okay. And he had a throne of ivory that was covered with gold. Like, it's enough alone to me that you have a throne that's made out of ivory.
Yeah.
But then to cover it with gold. They said there was no throne like Solomon.
Have you ever seen those documentaries of dictators or drug kingpins? They like burn money because they don't know what to do with it. Like, that just is what it reminds me of. It's like, what are you even doing?
What is happening?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing. Some of the people are going to rebel against Solomon's son. His name is Rehoboam, and he's the entitled brat prince. That's kind of how I look at him. And he becomes king after Solomon dies. And now some of the people from the other tribes are coming to him and saying, your dad worked us hard. Like, there were times where it felt like we were slaves in our own country, and we'd really like you to back off of that. We'd like you to be a better king. What do you say? And his older advisors were like, you should do what they are asking. It's a fair thing they're asking. You guys are sitting pretty. You still got the ivory covered golden throne thing happening there. And he's like, what do my best friends say? And he goes to, I don't know, his fraternity or something. That's how it feels. And they're like, that's a terrible idea. You should tell him I'm going to make you work 2 times as hard. And so these entitled brats say this stuff. And that's what he tells them. I'm going to go with the second group of people instead of the people who've walked around the block a couple of times, you know? And the kingdom is divided. And it's given to a guy named Jeroboam. So the bigger half is, it's not half. The bigger part is given to Jeroboam. And there's a couple of prophets in an exchange. And I want to make sure that I share this correctly. One day, Jeroboam, he is standing at an altar in Bethel, which, P.S., Jeroboam lets things go to pot too. Okay. After God has blessed him and he's done all this amazing stuff, he's like, oh, it's a good idea as if we worship idols. Okay. It's Gomer Pyle is Jeroboam. Apparently.
Sounded like it, yeah.
But this prophet comes out of nowhere, and the Lord sent me with a message, he says, about this altar that you're standing at in front of this, image of a G-O-D, little G-O-D. A child named Josiah will be born into David's family. He will sacrifice on this altar. The priests who make offerings here and the human bones will be burnt on it. That's a wake-up call. You will know that the Lord has said these things when the altar splits in half and the ashes on it fall to the ground. Jeroboam pointed at the prophet and shouted, grab him! But right away, Jeroboam's hand became stiff and he couldn't move it. And the altar split in half and the ashes fell to the ground, just as the prophet had warned. Please pray to the Lord your God, Jeroboam says. Ask him to heal my hand. So the prophet did, and Jeroboam's hand was healed. Come home with me and eat something. I wouldn't go with you, even if you offered half of your kingdom, because I won't eat or drink here either. The Lord said, I can't eat or drink anything, and I have to go home in a different way that I came here. That's what God told me. So 3 things. I can't eat, I can't drink, go home a different route. Boom. He has now just said no to a king. That's kind of a big deal. But as he's on his way home, at the same time, another prophet who, I don't know, was feeling feisty that day. He lived in Bethel. One of his sons said, hey, there was this prophet that came from Judah and he did this thing and the ashes and the altar split and all this stuff happened. Show me which way he went, the old prophet says. And his sons pointed out the road. Put a saddle on my donkey. He gets on the donkey, he rides off, he finds this prophet, and he says, are you the prophet from Judah? Yeah. Come home with me and have something to eat. No. What are the 3 things? I can't eat with anybody, I can't drink while I'm on this journey, and I got to go home a different way. And he says, the old prophet says, oh, well, I'm a prophet too. And actually, one of the Lord's angels told me to take you to my house and give you something to eat and drink. Oh, in that case, the other prophet gets up and he goes home and he goes to eat with them. And in that moment, as he's eating, the prophet, the old prophet who had lied before, is now telling him a real prophecy. Listen to the Lord's message. You have disobeyed the Lord your God. He told you not to eat or drink anything here, but you came home and ate with me. And so when you die, your body won't be buried in your family tomb. Well, after the meal, the old prophet, he got his donkey ready and he's leaving. And along the way, a lion attacks him and kills him. And doesn't attack the donkey and doesn't eat the guy. The lion's just sitting there staring. And there's the dead prophet and there's the donkey staring. It was quite a sight to see, I'm sure. But I read that, I'm like, what is the point of this story? Mm-hmm. What is this all about? Would I have been tempted to think that guy, well, if you're a prophet and the angel told you, maybe this is part of this, maybe this is what God wants for me. And I read this incredible insight from, I can't tell you the name of the scholar because I was like Google searching. I'm like, what is the importance of this? Gotquestions.org, we've shared this before, sometimes has a really interesting insight. But it was talking about the disobedience of a king and how there were repercussions for his disobedience. It doesn't matter what level you're at. There's a king and there's a prophet. Both of them did not obey the word of the Lord. Both of them suffered the consequences. And what was really telling is when you're feeling pretty good about yourself, I just turned a king down. I did good. Mm-hmm. I'm obeying God. I'm on the right path. And then all of a sudden,
sure. Yeah.
Something comes in, it kind of throws you for a loop. You're like, oh, well, maybe I'm supposed to do that. God must have said that.
Right. Right.
And I thought that was fascinating. Oh, the point I think is for us to be obedient to God's voice in our lives. Sometimes he uses other people, but if it causes you to go, wait, that disrupts me from what God had told me through his word before, I'm cautious about that.
Well, it reminds me of today we have scripture And I know there's certain parts about scripture that we have different interpretations on, and there's different denominations and there's things like that. But for the most part, there's a pretty good understanding of the basics that we need of scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have people that even turn into cult leaders.
Yes.
And they can be convincing.
Very convincing. Because some of the crazy stuff that they say are like,
they don't start with the crazy.
No, they don't.
Right? They start convincing they can shoot their house, right? Like this guy.
Right.
And I think we've all said, I would never fall for something like that. Mm-hmm. And maybe on the one you were watching, maybe that's true. Maybe there's certain different, I think they have such charisma is a word that comes to mind with a lot of cult leaders. Some may not, be that type of personality that would convince you of something. But I've even worked with just personalities that have maybe made me question my morals.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Or not my belief, but like, well, maybe it's not so bad to do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is just a coworker that's not a cult leader at all, And I think there are people like that though, that will really take us off the path if we're not following what scripture actually says.
And it's really interesting. There is scripture talking about to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Mm-hmm. You think about the wisdom of Solomon, there was nobody wiser than him in all the land until Jesus, right? And so you can be so smart that you're stupid is what I've learned from Solomon.
Uh-huh.
I would never do this. I know that this is the right thing, but I'm going to try this. I don't know. The enemy wants to trip us up any way he can. And I think his favorite sin we've talked about before is pride. And so if he can somehow get us to either be so humble that we screw up because we want everybody to think we're that humble, or he wants to trip us up on our ego in some way. Mm-hmm. And if I'm feeling pretty good because I resisted an urge here, we're to be on guard.
Sure.
Because if that part of the armor is foolproof, maybe this part of the armor isn't. Yeah. There's an Achilles heel maybe here somewhere. And to be mindful that he will do anything he can to bring down as many people as he can.
Yeah.
And if he can use you to take out other people, and that's the thing, if you've been given any semblance of a role in leadership position or an authoritative role, if you're a parent even, okay, we have to be extra cautious and extra mindful because our influence can contaminate the faith of others. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be responsible for any of that, even though God is gracious and forgiving and he will forgive me. And I'm sure there have been ways that I have done that in some way.
Sure.
So thank you, God, for your grace and your forgiveness. But at the same time, be mindful that you are apt to fail as a human being. You are flawed and your ego didn't save you. Jesus saved you.
Do you know the difference between a bright idea and a good idea?
Is this a joke?
No, this is something that as I was in Ephesians 1-3 last week, because I got to go to the seminar by scholar N.T. Wright, and now I'm just kind of transitioning to Ephesians 4 and 5 to just share a couple points here. One thing that he brought up is there's a difference in bright ideas and good ideas.
Okay. So I don't know how would you characterize the word bright?
Well, and let me just tell you then, because it's one of those. It's like,
but I wanted to play your game.
Well, it's not a you could see where he's coming from.
Okay,
you may have your own thought about what bright means. There's a million definitions of words like that. But the way he said it is, it really got me to think about social media.
Okay,
good ideas of. You just take that face value. It's a good idea. It's going to help people. It's going to help prosper. It's going to keep you even grounded. And a bright idea, he said it this way, bright ideas and deceit cause destruction, even if they are ideas that are, quote, ahead of the curve. We were on this topic, I think, at the time in Ephesians 4 of sexuality, certain obvious sins. What it really got me to think of is social media. A good idea is certainly providing for your family and making sure that the workload's not too much and all of that. A bright idea might be trying to become an influencer at all costs, sacrificing the privacy of your family or changing your personality, constantly telling lies to make up that these things happen to you. The pressure of becoming a social media influencer is what I thought of when he said, there's a difference in good ideas and bright ideas. Because you could make a lot of money as a social media influencer. There's certainly perks of the quote side hustle, but I think we've also seen there's an exhaustion to it. What there can be a fakeness to it. I think there's a lot of great influencers that are just doing, the best they can and all of that. But I think it takes a toll. I think it certainly takes a toll.
I think that could be an Achilles heel that we talked about for some. And it could go either way. It's a person that wants to make everything look like they're perfect.
Yeah.
Or they like the attention of false humility, where everything's, I don't care. But maybe they secretly do and still want you to like their video coverage.
Sure.
Because they're so boss they don't care. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. But if I guess if I'm doing this, a good guardrail thing for me would be, who am I doing this for? Who am I posting this for? Is this simply for me in some way? Or is this in service to others?
Sure.
And if it goes through that filter, which you're going to have family photos and things like that, but maybe it's to share with your family and your friends. Hey, this is our new family photo.
Yeah.
Thought you'd like to see it. But then also not be scared to show the photos of you, not at your family photos best. Here we are when Jeffrey got chocolate sauce all over the back seat. And I had to say a word that I should have my mouth washed out with soap or something like that,
Well, he said, and again, he was more in the explicitly sin conversation.
Okay.
These the parts of the seminar that ran together, there's so much that he got from this point to this point to this point. So I wish I could exactly go where he went. But I know we were in that kind of I'll read the verses that he said compound on each other. But that's one thing that I thought, that is, when he says a difference between a bright idea and a good idea, there are many that are, quote, ahead of the curve. And as we see with sexual deviance, sexual ethics in our society today, revolutionary, we're free and we ahead of the curve, even though we've seen sexual deviance for generations, doesn't mean it's a good idea. Progressive doesn't always mean good idea. It does in some situations, sure. But he was talking about how verse 22 in Ephesians 4 compounds on verse 19. So verse 22 says, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. That compounded on what he just shared in verse 19. The people that are closed-minded and harden their hearts against Christ is this: they have no sense of shame. They live for lustful pleasure and eagerly practice every kind of impurity. And often, I think it's in Ephesians, he may say this in another letter, but this is Paul writing to Gentiles, some of which were you. I believe that's Corinthians maybe, where there is now, we need to move into the good idea category, not trying to outsmart life, outsmart God with our human wisdom and our quote freedom in that way to do whatever we want.
Yeah, I think the freedoms that you're talking about have been something that people have been flirting around with for millennia.
Yeah.
And anything and everything goes. I mean, in the 60s, it was just free love, and this is nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
It is interesting, though. So I look at maybe things that are blatantly obvious, something that even scripture just calls out, like, even the 7 deadly sins. Ooh, that's bad. I've never done that. Ooh, that's bad. I've never done that. But okay, but Lord, we know that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So what in this way am I doing that I can apply what he's saying to? And being open to, maybe I've looked at my life as a merit badge system. Max Lucado was talking about this the other Sunday. As a Boy Scout, he wanted his sash to have every badge on it. And he said for a long time in his life, he looked at getting to heaven as like a merit badge situation. So if I did this, so many of these, like when you were Boy Scout, so when you swam so many laps, I guess.
I think I got 0 merit badges. I got to tenderfoot. I quit.
Okay. So in his analogy here, you would go to hell. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I think what you were about to say, that most people think about it like this.
You have to do a certain thing and in fact, I was watching a movie with my husband the other night. And the ideal of God, which looking up into the sky this is Jack Nicholson talking to Morgan Freeman, bucket list. Fascinating movie. Looking up at this supreme being that apparently has made it all, and I look up into the sky and I have to do so many things to make him pleased or happy. And he wasn't corrected in terms of Morgan Freeman when he was talking to him about faith. He wasn't corrected. And I thought, wow, so that's very telling. Most of the religions are on a merit badge kind of basis. In fact, all of the religions are on a merit badge type of basis except for Christianity, which is clearly just a grace gift. You didn't do anything.
Right.
There is no sash.
Yeah.
You can't do anything to get this back. And it's simply a gift, and it's because I love you. Mm-hmm. And it's like, whoa. So that puts me on an even playing field with everyone.
You're right.
Including the people we've gone, have you seen the way that they...
I get that I may not do it, quote, as much. Mm-hmm. I get that there are egregious things. We've talked about this countless times.
Yeah.
Yes, there are worse sins than others. What Hitler did is worse than stealing a pencil. Yes.
Yeah.
But I am a sinner.
Yeah.
We all start in the category of sinner.
Yes.
And we always will be until we're seen as righteous because of the work of Christ that covers us.
He's the only one that can check the box.
Yeah.
He gets the badges.
That's right. He gets the badges. I don't need no stinking badges. So no, I guess I'll say this real quick. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but just with the misconception that is out there about merit badges and how heaven works and Jack Nicholson and all that stuff. I saw something the other day. It was a TikTok video, and it was a guy on the street saying, if Satan did if Satan is getting you to do what he did and disobey God, why is he torturing you for eternity? And I thought, surely somebody answers the question very simply.
Wait, I need you to restate what what did he say? He
said, why does Satan want to torture you for eternity if all he's doing is getting you to disobey the same God that he did? And I thought, this is a very simple answer.
Wow.
Surely one of the comments, it's had 20,000 likes and God knows how many views. And I go through the comments and I'm not seeing a single person answering it. I'm like, it's very simple. Satan is not torturing you. He's going to be tortured. He's bringing people down with him. But he's not in charge in hell when all is said and done and final judgment's done.
Weirdly.
And these misconceptions that are just out there and masses of people believe.
And it sums it up nicely. It's not about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about God and his vendetta against God.
Yeah.
He doesn't give a rip about me or you.
Very true. Very true.
At all.
Yeah. That's a good point. So I think when you talk about kind of maybe some of the everyday, I think there's two things in Ephesians 5 that I wanted to just discuss that he said, and it has to do with maybe some of the everyday things that we may stumble on and have to look at ourselves on. And a lot of it can come to jokes. But then there's also a verse that speaks to the culture that we live in. I love how he broke this down. So let me just read, it's Ephesians, I'll read 3 through 7. Ephesians 5, 3 through 7.
I mean, get it right, Carter.
7. When people saw 7, they were like, there's no chapter 7. Let there be no sexual immorality, impurity, or greed among you. Such sins have no place among God's people. Obscene stories, foolish talk, and coarse jokes, these are not for you. Instead, let there be thankfulness to God. You can be sure that no immoral, impure, or greedy person will inherit the kingdom of Christ and of God. For a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of this world. Don't be fooled by those who try to excuse these sins, for the anger of God will fall on all who disobey him. Don't participate in the things that these people do. Now, let me go, because verse 6, it's going to be key the way he said it. Let me go to the NASB. Verse 6 says, see that no one deceives you with empty words, for because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. So one is, I'll speak to culture first.
That kind of goes along with the story of the prophets, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's true. The empty words, right? But here N.T. Wright, compared empty words is what we hear today with intolerance or hate speech. Now, of course, that is true. You can be a Christian and be an absolute dummy and say something that is hate speech, but often on the subject specifically of sexual ethics, standing up for what the Bible believes in is becoming more and more hate speech. And here he is, N.T. Wright beautifully put, the empty words is culture today. It is no, this is just the idea. I remember I was in college and a friend of mine, a potluck roommate of mine was in theater, and we went to a show of his, I guess. And maybe I was talking to him after the show, and it was a risque show. I didn't realize all that would be in it. And just the references and just the talk and what it was about. And I said, wow, for college, for the official program of a college, I said, it was pretty risque. And I was kind of joking anyway. I was serious, but I wasn't like condemning him. And he goes, it's whatever year it was. It's 2009. People can get over it. And it's like, what does the year have to do with immorality? Like, I don't understand why morals, just because of a certain year, what does that ever had to do with anything? But that's the way people talk.
Yeah.
It's 2024 now.
Yeah.
So like, is murder okay? Or will that be okay in a few years? Like, the year has nothing to do with morality.
I think people think they're growing the more existential they're thinking.
Sure.
Because it separates them from anything that's truly grounded.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel there was so many people in college 9 years before the thing that you're talking about, actually, and before that too, having those conversations with people who are seeking. And I think that's the thing. People are seeking, and it feels like they are seeking anything other than what is true. Isn't that strange? So when I want to lose weight or be healthy or obtain something that will require sacrifice, I want to do the fast method because I want it now, or whatever.
Right.
And it goes against logic. What we know over and over again is if you eat healthy and it's diet and exercise. This is what we know.
Yeah.
But we don't want that. We want something else, and we want it different.
That's spirituality now, isn't it?
You want what's true. Here it is. It has been over and over and over again proven, the accuracy of the scriptures.
Right.
It's like, well, we found this little loophole here, but we're not even talking about the giant divide that we could drive semi-trucks through with other thinking and theologies. It's strange to me.
Sure.
And that loophole, let's talk about it with real experts who would probably help explain some of that away, grammatical and otherwise, the context of text. But I was watching a documentary about Scientology, and I'm sitting here thinking, you'll go through all these levels. Like you said, they won't start with the crazy. They'll end with it.
Sure.
And so now you're at this place where you have, even it feels like exorcised the demons. And I keep putting things in quotes. It feels like you've almost exorcised these demons that they're telling you if you just say the negative situation and that way you'll get control and all this stuff. It's like this very new agey meets, I don't know. They prove it over and over again that L. Ron Hubbard was not well.
Right.
Like he claimed to do things he did not do. His own wife was trying to get away from him. Not a good situation. And now we have celebrities talking about these incredible things. And I've heard it said even from Scientologists, it's tongue in cheek. Or when you're in the middle of something like this, your whole family is now in it and you don't want to leave because your family's there and you want them to be safe. And they will have to say, I don't own you, I disown you, I have to separate you. All the different lingo that goes along with it. But I'm sitting here thinking, we will buy anything that does not have to, and I don't know, is it old-fashioned to believe in Jesus? Is that why we're here? I mean, like, seriously, we take Jesus to the nations. China now has this crazy revival going on for Christianity.
Oh, yeah. No, it's fastest growing. That's right.
They want Jesus.
I heard Mike Winger from the Bible Thinker podcast talk about this, that gullibility, people in America, we'll say America, in our society, often put on Christians. They're so gullible. And gullibility is really a human quality. And you can be gullible about anything. And that's whether that's Scientology. And Mike, what he was referencing are atheists, of people that get in these groups online, and the mythicists, the people that say Jesus never even existed. Scholars will laugh in your face if you say a historical Jesus never existed. And yet There are droves of people. I get on TikTok right now, scroll some lives. I can show you one right now that is claiming Jesus never existed. And gullibility is just a human thing. We can fall into anything that we want to believe.
You're right. And so what the solution is that Jesus told us that people are going to know that we are Christians by the way that we love one another. Mm-hmm. Our witness is going to be a really big deal. I mean, the word of the Lamb and the blood of the testimony. Am I getting that backwards? I'm quoting Revelation
remember,
here.
whatever you say, I'm not going to know.
Oh my word. I kind of want to look that up so I don't come off as heretical. But anyway, no, but it's talking about, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. That's it.
Yeah.
It's through what Jesus did for us and that we are now telling people about it. I don't care how old fashioned it is. I don't care what you think about me to some extent. Mm-hmm. I care about you.
Yeah.
And that's not going to keep me from loving you and sharing truth with you in love.
And I want to end with two things because the jokes and the obscene jokes and the things that I just covered. Let me start with that next week.
Okay.
Because I think we could really break that down too.
Yeah.
So when it comes to foolish talk and coarse joking and all of that, what does that mean? Let's start with that next week. So let me share two thoughts. One is I love the philosopher, somebody that was smart, said it like this. The point of having an open mind, as our culture is all about, and we've talked about spirituality, and this is kind of what made me think of it. The point of having an open mind is to close your mind down again on something when you find that it's true.
That's so good.
I don't have an open mind about gravity. My mind's closed down on gravity. I know it exists.
Yes.
So once you find the factual evidence of whatever.
That's so good.
It's not just religion too. Whatever you find that is true, you shouldn't have an open mind about it anymore. You're on an open mind while you're seeking.
That's the excuse that we find a lot of people, right? While they're seeking. I don't want somebody else to tell me how to think is something that I'll hear.
Sure.
And Jesus invites you to taste and see and know. That's the difference. Come and see, taste and see, know that I am good. And then shut it down.
Shut it down like, once you know.
The truth.
So how do we share it? And I've shared this quote with you with the late pastor, Tim Keller. When it comes to truth and love, how do we do this? We live in a culture, doesn't want to be told what to think, doesn't be told what to believe, wants us to just go, whatever you think's probably true. That can't logically be true.
Right.
Every religion in the world can't coexist because they can't all be true.
By the way, the people who have the coexist bumper stickers, look, if you have one of those on your cart, please don't let this leave a bad taste in your mouth. I don't see though, when I've been at those prayer gatherings where we have every faith leader in the group, we are all uncomfortable because nobody believes that we are all correct, except maybe my Buddhist friend that I met. He was a very nice man.
Right.
But they're very open to receiving truth and whatever that looks like. And I don't know. I don't see anybody, like I'm not going to see a rabbi with that on the back of his bumper.
Yeah. Well, I've always wanted to...
Because he believes in,
Totally. I always want to stop somebody at the store and ask them what they mean. Because if they just mean we should get along peacefully.
Agreed.
I'm like, totally. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's fully what it means for everybody.
Yeah.
I love, my pastor is friends with rabbis and imams in the area, Muslim leaders. And I love this story. The first time that he talked to a Muslim leader, the guy was kind of skeptical. And he's like, you think I'm going to hell? and my pastor goes, well, my tradition would say with you rejecting Christ, yes, you would go to hell. That's good. I think you're going to hell. Now we can have an honest conversation. And they're friends.
Yes.
It's okay to have disagreements and
how are you going to have a conversation and share Jesus if you're not being like that?
Totally. So here's what Tim Keller said.
Yeah.
And it's just so good. And I'll end with this unless you have anything else. Love without truth is sentimentality. Mm-hmm. It supports and affirms us, but keeps us in denial about our flaws. However, this is good for somebody that's very adamant about their faith and wants to shove it in people's faces. Truth without love is harshness. It gives us information, but in such a way that we really cannot hear it.
Yes.
Important if I am all about faith. Mm-hmm. But generally, our culture is in that first phase. Mm-hmm. I just want the love. I don't want the truth. And it has to be both equally so that we can share what's true in love.
And I think that Jesus encompasses what the totality of what love is, includes truth.
Yeah.
So if you are loving someone well, then you are being truthful with that person.
That's true. That's true.
If you are only being truthful with a person, it doesn't necessarily encompass love.
Am I not? Right.
But if you are loving a person well, then you are being honest with that person. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And in 1 John 4, it says that God is love. He is all of these things. It's not one separated from the other. And if our definition of love does not include truth, then it is the incorrect definition.
Yep. It's just enabling. Thank you. This is the Anything But Quiet Time podcast. I'll do that shameless plug again. If you want to subscribe on our YouTube channel.
Where's the click thing?
I know. We need to
Wherever it
point
is.
to the right place.
Because they don't know. They don't read. That's what bothers me. Click subscribe. It's like, where? Where's that button that's blinking and bright?
We'll see you next week.